Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Many of our followers come to us looking to live healthier lives. And today there are over 37.3 million people with diabetes, and this condition is on the rise. And unfortunately, today's food system is set up to cause failure for the average person. And so many food are packed with toxic ingredients, artificial sugars, and other inflammatory additives. And not to mention, some of the foods are marketed to be healthy and end up to be having actually worse effect in your blood on your blood sugar. This is why today we're really glad to be joined by Dr. Stacy Baker. Dr. Stacy holds a doctorate in traditional naturopathy, a master of science in holistic nutrition, a level 2 integrative health and functional medicine certification, a functional medicine board certification, and is trained in vinyasa yoga. So she's going to have a lot of really awesome information to share. I just saw her. One more time.
Hi.
Hello.
Very nice to meet
you.
you. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Really excited to talk about blood sugar. It's like one of my favorite topics.
Yes, and if I get long-winded, I get excited about talking about it too. So just reel me in.
Awesome. Okay, before we start, tell us a little bit about your background and how you become a health expert.
Thank you for that title. I think we're all just trying to get to that expert level. So for me, I come from a family of MDs actually, so very much raised in the conventional setting, but struggled with a lot of chronic issues myself personally honestly from a young age on that really conventional wasn't really hitting the mark on getting me better or even explaining why I felt the way I did. And it was interesting because I came from a big family and I was the only one that struggled with these health conditions. So it was just kind of, so for me, I had done the conventional route for such a long time, never really got where I wanted to. I didn't want to be on medication and I wasn't really guided in the direction I wanted to go with diet and lifestyle and things like that. So I'm the kind of person that, I'm kind of like, I'm just going to find out for myself. I'm going to learn everything I can. And so I was personal training when my children were young in my early 20s, and I had clients that were dealing with a lot of the same things. They were starting to downregulate or have resistance to weight loss or energy issues and, things like that. So I really wanted to get to the bottom of it. So it was just every little thing that I have witnessed myself or, dealt with personally was just another thing that I was inspired to learn more about. So dealing with that and breast implant illness, I somehow stumbled upon functional medicine and I just haven't looked back. And it's just been something that I wanted to incorporate along with naturopathy because it's just really the kind of mecca of getting to the root of why we are symptomatic.
I mean, calling you an expert is like you have so many
Oh,
certifications. I don't think we have anybody like on Instagram live with that many certifications and breadth
oh.
of knowledge. So it's
I
so
can't
impressive.
stop learning. It's really like one of those things once you get to the tip of the iceberg, you're just like, okay, now I want to learn about this. And and it's not so much about the letters, it's just like to get a clearer understanding of these things that you're really, trying to figure out. So it's just fun.
Yeah. So in your words, like what is holistic nutrition? Because then you're really approaching things through the functional medicine lens, and then it's a holistic approach.
Yeah. So holistic nutrition, I wanted that to be my stopping point. When I got my master's in it, I was like, okay, I just want to be a holistic nutritionist. I want this to be everything. But I was finding that the people coming to me, had already cleaned up their diet for the most part. We're trying to eat intuitively, but when you have things like gut pathogens or toxicities and things like that, you can't really be intuitive with your eating or you're not absorbing what you're eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was realizing that, okay, we need to utilize obviously eating correctly, but also learning to detoxify and support the body in that way. So, holistically, holistic nutrition, I think, is being able to have freedom with eating, appropriately, learning to fuel our body, learning to be instinctive with what we're taking in. But that's really hard to do when you're being, overloaded, like I said, with toxins and pathogens and things like that. So there's definitely a time and a place, and but it's just kind of learning the effects that food have on our body systemically.
Yeah, and I love this quote you had from Wendell Berry, like we're fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and then treated it by the health industry, which pays no attention to food. I mean, like that's
Yes.
just like so true. So why did that resonate with you?
It did. It did. It really resonated with me because I learned early on. I think that was my first entryway into learning that things maybe aren't the way they're kind of presented for us, right? And so when I was pregnant with my son, which he's 11 now, I was just starting to learn about the food system and how poisoned it is and how unregulated it is. And I really was like, okay, starting to put that together. And then I started to put together, all right, well, I keep going to the doctor and all they're doing is handing me prescriptions. And so I was like, I realized that a diagnosis is basically made to match a prescription up to, and we're never really taught. The one chronic exposure we have is our food and our water supply, and we're never even taught to correct or even think about that. And they're both poisoned. So it's just, it definitely was a quote that really hit hard to me.
So how can holistic nutrition be used in managing diabetes, and then also the different type of diabetes?
Yeah, sure. So, like I said, learning how you can certainly use holistic nutrition and holistic healing and learning how to manage type 2. And that's the thing that really needs to be taught and realized is that type 2 is reversible and it's preventable. And that's just something that's not really put out there. So those are two things so being empowered right there is so important. But learning how to fuel your body properly, stabilize your blood sugar, learning how to combine things like protein, fiber, fat, things like that to help with that. And then learning to shut off the stress response so our hormones don't come into play and start kind of wreaking havoc. Stress management, things like that, that all has to be kind of part of your protocol, as far in also things like incorporating movement and training and things like that. So it's just definitely like a full spectrum approach when it comes to bringing in the nutrition aspect into type 2. And then the difference, so type 1 is generally congenital, so we're usually born with it. It's when we don't make enough insulin to clear our glucose from our bloodstream. Type 2 is created over time, and it is becoming younger and younger of an occurrence, which is it's so baffling to me that this isn't highlighted more, especially when it's really affecting children. And you see that with children obesity, and I could go on forever on that part. But basically, when you're type 2, your body has been your blood glucose levels have been elevated for so long, or they're spiking, dropping so inconsistently all the time that you lose that proper insulin response. And so your tissues start to be more resistant to the insulin that it's releasing, and then eventually over time can cause damage where it's not really releasing the proper amount to do anything anymore. So basically your blood glucose levels just stay high consistently.
So what are some causes for type 2?
Yeah, so typically, obviously we know diet, right? Diet's like the main thing, but a lot of things that aren't really looked at, like liver dysfunction and stagnation. Our liver decides when glucose should be released, and it decides if it's going to store it as glycogen and things like that. So that is one thing that really needs to be looked at as a root cause of dysfunction, because not only when I think about blood sugar dysfunction, I think of hyper and I think of hypo, because a lot of people have blood sugar dysregulation that actually their blood sugars drop really low. And that can trigger a stress response. So that's when you're thinking about supporting the cortisol, the stress response, and that sort of thing. That can definitely be a root cause as well. And then you think about the mitochondrial aspect, because glucose is basically our energy. We use it to make energy. And if we can't make proper energy, then we start storing it as fat, storing it in the liver, and storing it in the bloodstream. So a lot of times you have to break down mitochondria looking at cofactors like CoQ10, B vitamins, magnesium, amino acids, if your body's not properly converting that, because if it's not, it's just going to start building up and being stored. So that's another root cause that I see that is really not addressed. And then things like lack of sleep, nutrient deficiencies like chromium, magnesium, vitamin D, things like that, lack of movement. So just being stagnant, not getting up and getting moving. Dehydration is another huge one, because when the body is dehydrated, it will actually make and store fat to make metabolic water. So it will find the water in some way and it will create fat to make it, which is so crazy. And we don't really understand all the compensatory mechanisms our body has, but that is one way. So the body will find it, and so it'll make its own water by making fat if you're dehydrated. So that is a really big thing that's overlooked. And I can't say enough about looking at, for one, alcohol and the effect it has on the liver and blood sugar instability. Because basically when you introduce alcohol into the system, you bypass glycolysis. So you're bypassing what makes our energy and our energy production. And the same goes for fructose metabolism, which you're thinking, okay, high fructose corn syrup, refined sugars, and even really salty foods can cause that fructose metabolism to happen. And so you're thinking soft drink epidemic, all these cheap sweeteners that are turned into syrups, that's going to activate that fructose metabolism and put us into a survival mode, where we're going to go straight. And what happens when your body, the reason why it's so detrimental is because when your body uses that metabolism process, it goes straight to the liver. So it's burdening the liver even more, and you're having more glucose just put into your bloodstream and fat.
That is so crazy.
Isn't it crazy?
So many of these components, I don't think we being really educated that all these things actually impact diabetes. And even if you get diabetes, you just get put on insulin or put on some pills, like without actually managing, your stress, your sleep, your dehydration, like the things we're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the thing. It's like, you have to follow the money. It's way more profitable for them to keep you on a, metformin or something like that. That's going to work for a short time. And then eventually you'll have to be put on insulin if you can't control your blood sugar with that. And it's just snowball effect to keep you on products when it's really preventable and treatable.
Right. So should someone with type 2 really avoid sugar altogether?
So I like this question because it is, and you're probably not gonna like my answer because it depends on the person. And one way that I would like to really see an individual response to certain things is by a continuous glucose monitor. So a CGM, you can easily, especially if you're pre-diabetic, you can easily get a prescription for one. They're so amazing and so easily accessible now, and you can just learn your individual response to all of the different foods. I will say, I don't think any person should be having refined sugar. And I don't think any person should be having sugar alone. I think you should always pair it with protein, fat, fiber. Unless you're an athlete who's running triathlons or something like that and you need quick energy, that's totally not the average person. But I don't think anyone should have it on its own because of the oxidative effects that it has, and it down regulates your energy long term.
Interesting. So then we talk about sugar, and then people, when they get diabetes, if they have a sweet tooth, they all want sugar alternatives, and then they go to artificial sweeteners.
Yes.
So are artificial sweeteners suitable for diabetics? Like, why or why not?
So this is one of those things that people just don't want to hear. And I had posted something a while back about how, even natural artificial sweeteners are perpetuating dysregulation when it comes to blood sugar. And people are like, some people are like, yes, and other people are like, what a joke, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, well, let's just talk about this for a second, because when you are telling your brain you're getting glucose and then you don't give it glucose, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to be stressed out. It's going to be trying to make energy from something that you don't have coming in. Your stress hormones are going to fire. You can't trick your brain, and so if if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck, if something is like, oh, this is too good to be true, it tastes so sweet and it doesn't have any calories, it probably is too good to be true, because you're still perpetuating that sweet craving that is not normal to have, right? And so not only that, but a lot of them disrupt the microbiome. So, things like erythritol and aspartame, which hopefully nobody uses anymore, those things definitely can feed pathogenic bacteria and really wreak havoc on any good microbiome that you have. So, and like I said, and some do affect insulin. So they may not affect your blood sugar off the bat, but they can affect your insulin, which is crazy, right? So we want to make sure we're keeping, the body supported. And so if you are wanting something sweet, have something that's unrefined, like honey, maple syrup, a date even, because it's got that extra fiber in it. But have it in combination with protein, fats, and fiber so that you can stabilize that blood sugar response.
That makes a lot of sense. We actually have one audience also posted about dates. The
Yeah.
dates are the best natural sweetener.
Absolutely. Yeah. They have that added fiber. And like I said, it's all about your individual response, because we all have different mineral levels. We all have different exposures. And so making sure that there is not one size fits all when it comes to nutrition, because we're also biologically different.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent for CGM. I
Yes.
one before,
Yes.
and it's just really amazing.
Yes.
I like something I learned is like sweet potato actually spikes my sugar.
Exactly.
Whereas it's supposed to be super healthy for everyone. So as you
Mhm.
said, just like a no one size fits all.
There's not. I did one myself over the holidays, and I'm so glad I did, because it was like a little bit extra, like reel me in during the holidays. But it really gave me like the worst case scenario of like when you're gonna go overboard a little bit on sugar, like how your body actually responds to it. And for me, what I noticed was that I tend to go hypo very quickly after having something like that. So it wasn't that I was insulin resistant. It's that my body it kind of drops off. It clears so quickly that it drops off really low, but that triggers a stress response too. So that's not good either, So you want to make sure that it's stable throughout the day and not just up and down, constantly. So
But that means you can eat more sweet stuff.
yes, in the right combination, or like at the right timing at, before workouts or before a walk, or doing a walk after dinner like the Italians do. That's not a mistake why they, do that. It's to help with their blood glucose levels after their largest meal.
Right, right. We should all learn from Italians.
Yeah.
Anybody, in the blue zones.
Yes, exactly. They know what's up. We don't.
So do you have any healthy sweeteners to suggest for those who are prone to have a sweet tooth?
Yeah. So like I said, just do the ones that actually have good sources of unrefined raw sugar in them. Try not to go for the no sugar alternatives. Because, you're seeing stevia is added to everything now. Stevia is actually an endocrine disruptor. And so there are tons of articles and research out there saying that. So it's one of those things that the health industry finds an ingredient and they're like, oh yeah, this is so trendy and cool. We're going to use this instead of sugar. Yeah. And it's like, I'd rather you use coconut sugar. And like I said, raw honey, local honey, maple syrup, things like that, just in the right combination of things to help with that blood sugar response, or make sure you're having activity right after to help kind of stabilize instead of just crash after the fact.
We have one viewer ask about thoughts on monk fruit.
Monk fruit's one of those ones I'm afraid, like I said, anytime you have a natural, calorie-free, sugar-free thing with that same sweet taste, there's not enough information out there, but I'm telling you, it's coming. We have a lag time on scientific, people are waiting for either waiting for all the research, and they're not really looking at what their body's telling them. So be intuitive. If you have it and you feel like you don't have sweet cravings afterwards, or you don't feel, unfortunately they don't have a monitor that's going to check your insulin, which would be actually really helpful. be intuitive with it and be really honest with yourself. Is it triggering more cravings? Is it triggering you to have, those sort of things? Because the research is going to be years behind, and they're going to come out and they're going to say, oh, actually, yeah, stevia is causing a problem, and monk fruit's right behind it. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Right. It's kind of like the trans fat stuff.
Yes.
Margarine versus trans fat. Like years later, we're like, okay, butter is actually okay.
I know. It's one of those things. It's like, if you see something trendy in the food industry, just stay away, because it's probably going to have a fallout at some point and then a backlash. So just kind of stick with honey's been around forever. Maple syrup's been around forever. Stick with those, because those are ones that the body's going to be able to actually utilize. And, there are some good things about taking in glucose, but you got to be sure that your body's doing the right things with them.
Right. Right. Wow. This is such great information. I think your clients, your patients are really, really lucky.
Oh, thank you. So nice.
So tell us about the service you provide, and then, how can people work with you?
Yeah, so I do have a virtual practice. So I have clients all over the country and even some out of the country. I do functional lab testing to get to the root cause. So I practice root cause medicine. So looking at things like toxicities, looking at nutrient deficiencies, heavy metals. I look at the gut, I analyze what's going on with it. So we have some data to go off of. And then we create protocols based on what the lab readings say. And so I replace deficiencies. I work on healing the gut primary, and then work on detoxing the things that need support and things like that as we go, to just find balance and find your natural state of health.
Cool. I know you also have a podcast. So tell us about that. What kind of
Yeah.
you cover?
So
where we can find it?
The podcast is one of those things. I enjoy it. And I'm like, I'm just going to try it out. So it was my thing this year. It was my like New Year's, let's do something new thing. So basically I answer questions. So people send in questions for me and I answer those. Or if I get a lot of questions on Instagram that are repeating themselves, a lot of repetitive things, I will do a whole thing on that just to get in more depth of it. You used to be able to do longer videos on Instagram and you can't anymore. So I like to get more detailed into some things because people want some more of that. So yeah, so every once in a while, like my next episode is going to be talking about children's health, why this generation is so sick and not expected to outlive us, which is terrifying. So we're going to go into that. But I mean, my last one was talking about, travel tips and how to avoid exposure and, summer things. So it's all over the place right now. Just whatever you guys want to learn more about is what I'm talking about.
That is so cool. And it sounds so practical. Like,
Yeah.
I could go listen to every single one.
Yeah, I don't take it too seriously. It's like I don't have an agenda. I don't have sponsors. I just like to just talk about whatever you guys want to learn more about.
Awesome. So thank you so much for providing all this great information.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And then everyone be sure to follow Dr. Stacy at dr.stacy.nd. And then we'll have all the information under promoting this Instagram live so people can find where you are and listen to the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Have a great one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.